Okay, I'm going to kick us off so that we don't go too much overtime. Um, Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, whatever time it is for you. Um, I'm Naila Farouki. I'm the CEO of Arab Foundations Forum, and I will be hosting today's conversation with Hiba. Um, this conversation is part of our speaker series, part of AFF speaker series, which was a series that we started back in, I think it was May 2023. And since then, we've had a couple of different conversations where we try to talk to, leading voices in philanthropy and nonprofit. We were trying to create a space where we can have an exchange of ideas, and share some of the developments on some of the inspirational models that are being advanced in the region's philanthropy and nonprofit sector. And we started it, like I said, in May, and by October of that year, obviously everything changed, and we kind of pivoted away from just our speaker series as it was then, and morphed it a little bit into what we started calling the Gaza Chronicles, so that we could highlight and platform voices from our network in Gaza, and talk a little bit about the genocide, and talk a little bit about the context of all of that, and what how philanthropy was or was not showing up in that context. And then here we are, almost 2 years later, still having those conversations and still trying to figure out what's going on, and still trying to figure out how philanthropy can show up in this context. And so today's conversation isn't specifically about Gaza, but of course there will be some mention of Gaza, and some context. And I'm going to tell you first a little bit about um, our guest. First, about the organization that she represents, which is RIWAQ. Um, RIWAQ was founded in 1991, and since then, it's really been at the forefront of preserving Palestine's cultural heritage. It's had a particular focus on rural areas across the West Bank and Gaza. Um, and from the landmark registry of historic buildings, which documented around 420 villages, to these large-scale initiatives like 50 Village Rehabilitation Project, Riwaq has combined architectural restoration with job creation, which, if you know anything about the context of the West Bank and Palestine, you'd know that that's a very, very, very important uh, aspect of any kind of initiative or project. But it's also combined community empowerment and knowledge production. And their work goes beyond just safeguarding historic structures, but it also nurtures collective memory. It strengthens Palestinian identity, and resilience. And it positions heritage really as kind of a vital tool for socioeconomic and cultural development, which, again, in the context of today's, you know, geopolitical situation and this horrific genocide that we find ourselves um, witness to, is a very, very important. I mean, I would go as far as to say it's a very important tool of resistance, really. That kind of insistence on maintaining and preserving heritage and cultural heritage, especially, which is something that tends to get either uh, decimated quite quickly by occupying forces to ensure that that memory is erased. And so this kind of work really is also a form of resistance. And Hiba, who's with us, joined RIWAQ in 2019. Hiba and I met first at the reception desk of of the Westin Hotel in Cairo, just on the eve of our last members meeting in 2023, in September of 2023, so 1 month before the entire world changed. Hiba joined as the development officer for RIWAQ. She has her master's degree in media, art, and performance studies from Utrecht University in the Netherlands. And she also got her bachelor's in journalism, political science at Birzeit University in 2016. And Hiba is joining us from the West Bank. And so I'm just going to, introduce her. say hello, ask her to give us a little bit of just to kind of contextualize where this conversation is happening from, what situation this conversation is happening in. And I was telling Hiba before we started that I really want to do that. I want to couch this in the in the context of where she's sitting today, because I think it's very important for all of us as we kind of engage in these conversations to understand that, you're seeing on your screen somebody who looks perfectly happy and beautiful and alert, and she's present and she's with us and she's going to have a conversation about her amazing work, but she's having this conversation from a context that isn't any of those things. Um, and I think that's important to recognize and to acknowledge because yeah, I mean, just because, again, we're talking about the preservation of memory and history and cultural heritage, and it's important to understand that while things may look beautiful, they aren't necessarily beautiful. So before I ask Hiba to kind of step in and tell us everything, I'm just going to say very quickly um, some housekeeping rules, nothing too serious. We will have an open Q&A towards the end, but that Q&A will need to come in through the Q&A tab, which you'll find on the bottom of your Zoom platform. Try as much as possible not to put your questions in the chat, although we will be monitoring both. If you put them in the Q&A, it's just easier for us to monitor. And that's it. That's all the rule that we have. So, Hiba, hi.
Hi. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and thank you so much, AFF, for allowing us to have this platform. Very happy to see you again. And thank you all for joining as well. You were asking me about where we are, and now when you were asking me, I was just remembering that 2 days ago only, I was at RIWAQ with my colleagues, and we were just sitting and working. And then at around 1 p.m., we start hearing some gunshots very close to us. We try to go to like any channel to see what's going on. Of course, we do not see because these things take time. And because of the amount of news, of such news, it's very hard to track what's going on. But then we realized 2 hours later that the army is just across Riwaq. It was very close at a roundabout. And this is just to give you a very natural now context that is happening in the West Bank. We are hearing it, it's getting closer and closer. I'm sure you are seeing a lot of the settler attacks that are happening, the violations that are happening on heritage sites as well, on landscapes, on trees, attacking citizens in their own homes. This is unfortunately the reality of what's happening. And of course, this hasn't only started 2 years ago, this has been going on for years. But the intensity and the atrocity of how it is right now is just unimaginable. And of course, this is coming up in parallel with the genocide that is happening in Gaza, destroying everything that is in this beautiful strip and attacking humans, stones, and nature and everything in it. So yeah, this is how it is right now. We're trying as much as possible to continue with our work. As you said, we are trying because uh, we cannot also let them control our minds and our bodies, and at least with what we have. So yeah, at least we're trying to go to work, we're trying to talk to each other, we're trying to be there for each other, and that's the least we can do right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, thank you for saying that again, and just kind of setting that stage, because I think what I asked you first when we were, you and I were talking offline before we joined here was to say, are you safe? Are you are you concerned for your safety? And I think, basically what you said was compared to what's going on the other side of the country for you, you're relatively all of those things, but there's still all of these challenges that you have to face. And I think what we both were saying was how grateful, I guess that's the word, in this kind of situation, that contrary to what a lot of our peers and colleagues are feeling, this kind of impotence and this complete lack of ability to channel any of the rage and anguish and fear into something productive, we both have these jobs and these platforms that allow us to do something that at least feels somewhat useful. So, as a segue into that, I want to get us started a little bit to talk about RIWAQ and what you guys have been doing, um, which is really quite incredible, to be honest. And incredible not only because of what it's achieved, but I think because of the challenges it's had to overcome to achieve this kind of preservation. So the first thing I wanted to ask you, and I know you're going to walk us through a couple of different slides, and which I think is great. Visuals are very helpful. So I want to ask you if you can start us off by just letting us know a bit about how the idea for RIWAQ's Registry of Historic Buildings came about, and what sort of impact did that have on the organization's understanding of Palestinian cultural heritage?
Just gonna share my screen,
Hmm.
slides if it's possible. Okay, so I start my answer with this beautiful human. Her name is Suad Amiry. She is the founder of RIWAQ. And Suad founded RIWAQ in 1991, but her love for architecture and cultural heritage of Palestine started way before. She came to do her research, her PhD research, and visited different rural areas in Palestine. She captured some historic centers, some historic buildings, and she talked to the people there. And she noticed how abandoned these places are, particularly in villages and towns. Um, so as you can see, this is how the state of some of the historic centers in rural areas in Palestine are. They are abandoned, they're a bit scary for people, dangerous. It's a bit hard to imagine how they can be safe spaces for people. These are some of the images that Suad captured during her visit. And then she felt that there was a need to establish an institution that can actually work on preserving cultural heritage in Palestine, something that is more institutionalized. So she established RIWAQ. This is our beautiful building. It's based in Al Bire, Ramallah. And then she also realized that there hasn't been a lot of research done on cultural heritage in Palestine, and particularly, especially actually in rural areas. So in order for us to understand what we need to preserve and how are we going to preserve it, we need to document it. We need to register what kinds of building we have. We need to understand the typologies of those buildings. So between 1994 and 2004, so for 10 years, RIWAQ's team joined forces with students, with architects, archaeologists, researchers, in order to register all historic buildings in the West Bank, Jerusalem, and Gaza. And almost 50,320 buildings were registered in 422 villages, towns, and cities. And this has never been done before. So it was, the registry was considered to be a national documentation that anyone can use later on for the research or practices. Oh, sorry. And the registry is an open, anyone can have an access to it. So because we believe that this is not only the property of RIWAQ, this is the property of the Palestinian people. Anyone can access the district, the town, can access all the buildings, can understand what their physical state is, what needs to be done, the families that own these buildings. So it's a generic and a very holistic document that is owned by the Palestinian people. Yeah.
Amazing. And can you, because you're talking about that you guys have a focus on rural areas in Palestine as well, and I was wondering if you could give a little bit of explanation about what is the significance of that specifically. Has this had an impact on your process of community engagement? Like, what's the significance of specifically focusing on rural areas?
Yeah, there are different reasons on why we decided to focus more on rural areas. First of all, in the West Bank only, there are four CHOs, so four cultural heritage organizations that work on different locations. And I think that's very important to see how it is a very collaborative effort that is done by CHOs. So one, for example, Ta'awun works on the
Mhm.
old city of Nablus and Jerusalem. RIWAQ works mostly in rural areas. There's a CCHP works mostly in Bethlehem and the surrounding areas. There's the Hebron Rehabilitation Center, which works mostly in the old city of Hebron. So you can see that there's a division, more or less, of where the efforts can be so that we preserve as much as possible from the cities and rural areas. But more
Hmm.
importantly, is because we understood that rural areas in Palestinian history and Palestinian architecture have not had a lot of significance in research. There hasn't been a lot of research done about rural areas, despite them being very rich in their architectural, social, and economic aspects as well. So, not a lot has been written on Palestinian architecture in rural areas.
Hmm.
It's mostly focused on cities and maybe the relationship between the city and its surrounding villages, and not vice versa. So, that was one reason. And another reason is that, in general, Palestinian architecture and Palestinian cultural heritage has always been seen within a very biblical Zionist also point of view. So there haven't been many Palestinians actually doing the work and actually writing the narratives, documenting the narratives of the Palestinian people in those local areas and rural areas. So we understood from actually working with the communities, because the community in the end is the one who leads the preservation and rehabilitation processes. So
Hmm.
of course we learned so much about the crafts, we learned so much about the traditional knowledge, the indigenous knowledge that is actually within the village and town.
Hmm. I mean, I think, look, you said the word narrative and that preservation of narrative and also the ownership of narrative, which I really genuinely believe is is one of the most critical points of kind of the preservation of history and memory, because it's one of the easiest things to lose. Yani, my understanding as someone who's half Palestinian, the lens that I would look at cultural heritage and memory and all of that comes from the Nakba, right? So the Nakba, and knowing that there's been, that there's the historic ethnic cleansing of X number of villages, um, that is sort of the lens. You don't think about the heritage and the architectural heritage that's lost in all of that. You think about the political ramifications, and then, as you said, the narrative is written by another side. And if that narrative is owned only by another side, and we're not doing anything on our side to preserve our cultural heritage as well, and that memory, it will get lost. Um, and I think, this kind of leads me to the next question about, in your view and in the view of Riwaq, how does, or what's the role that cultural heritage plays in strengthening Palestinian identity, in preserving that heritage, and in preserving that collective memory? What is if you had to give like the top three things that you think are the most valuable in the role that would play, what would that be?
Yeah. I think that cultural heritage preservation in all localities is a very important topic to discuss, a very important thing to tackle. But I think when it comes even to the Palestinian cause, it becomes like an important backbone to our national struggle, our collective struggle, our collective past, and our identity, and even the present.
Hmm.
I mean, we are now losing, and in present time, we are losing more than we are actually being able to preserve. And we are seeing it happen in front of our eyes. It's not even about a past tense, it's even happening and continuing. But cultural heritage preserve and affirms our deep historical and cultural roots to for us as Palestinian people, and through the traditional knowledge, through traditional practices, language, buildings, landscapes, we are able to maintain a very strong sense of belonging and continuity.
Hmm.
That's the
Hmm.
only thing we have right now. So even in the face of displacement, apartheid, settler colonialism, we are still seeing cultural heritage as an act and a form of resistance and resilience for the Palestinian people, because we see it as not only preserving the stone, as you mentioned in the beginning. It's not only about safeguarding the building, as important as it is, but it's
Hmm.
also about the people who revive it, the people who use it for their own benefits, to enjoy it, to feel safe in it as well.
And to have that sense of pride, right? To be able to have a sense of pride in kind of the appreciation of that, if it's even if it's just an edifice, but at least there's you can attach some kind of sense of pride to it. And I know that you guys, part of RIWAQ's mission is also to help increase job creation and to develop a kind of job creation mechanism through your projects. And can you talk a little bit about that and talk a bit about like the challenges and sort of the accomplishments of that, and then also what has that done to improve local economy? What has that done to engage community? Like what's that process been like?
Yeah, I mean, as mentioned, we do not see cultural heritage preservation as only safeguarding the building as much as it is a motor for socioeconomic, development for the Palestinian workers. And this job creation project started mostly during the Intifada, so during the 2000s,
Hmm.
2001, when many workers did not have a job. It was like close to COVID, but of course with more restrictions and more fear. But it was very hard for them to go anywhere to work. So this is when we thought of restoration as being a means to have more jobs
Hmm.
for skilled and unskilled workers using local materials. And those unskilled workers are now, after years, they became the skilled workers who are now the professionals and who are now letting people know how to do restoration. So they learned restoration techniques through doing, and they were able to find a job. So of course, most of our budget is actually 60% of it, more or less, is labor, is a labor component. So we focus so much on creating this kind of space for workers to have a job opportunity. And we actually noticed how important this was, to be honest, especially during COVID, when definitely also many workers could not find jobs and they returned back to restoration. They found
Mm.
in restoration as a way also of working, learning more about it, and other than that. And also, they were able to revive traditional crafts, traditional knowledge. So only within their house, they're able to do that. So it
Hmm.
became also something that is very social, that everyone in the village would help each other. They would get the skills from each other, as because we are also really rely on local material, locally sourced materials as well.
Right.
And most of our work also focuses a lot on training. So also on creating this kind of first, of course, job creation, but also training opportunities for students, for architects, for engineers, in order for them also to learn more about the basics of restoration and hopefully also be able to find more jobs in that field. And with them, with those restoration workers, they were the ones who were able to rehabilitate over 130 historic buildings to be used as community centers. I would like to share some photos if
Please, absolutely.
this is one of Qasr Al Kayed Palace, a very important building in Sabastia. And Sabastia, by the way, is also a place that is now under threat by the Israeli occupation because they are trying to own a very important heritage site in the West Bank in Sabastia. But this building was restored.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then we have this in Tul Karim as well.
Wow.
We have this in the village of Qabatia, Jenin.
Oh my goodness, that's beautiful. Mm.
And all those buildings are spaces for community centers, for youth clubs, for women associations as well. Most of them are from the community itself. So they
Hmm.
are the ones who revive it, to be honest. And this is in Der Ghassane. This is for a women association. And
Wow.
then through the job creation project, we also were able to link it with our vision or our dream in RIWAQ, which is to protect 50 villages in the West Bank and Gaza, to rehabilitate those historic centers. And we have been able to rehabilitate a whole village. So it's not just one building, it's the whole historic center. This is, for example, in Jamma'in, in Khalil, in Hebron, in
Wow.
Nablus.
In Nablus, oh.
Yeah. This is in Hebron, Dahriye.
Wow.
This is also part of our preventive conservation, which is basically to just try to protect the building from the outside, create an alley and a landscape that is at least safe until hopefully later projects can come and try to protect it as much as possible for later projects.
Hmm.
This is also in Rantis, Ramallah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. It's so, yeah, that's incredible. That's really beautiful. Mm. We talked a little bit about narrative and sort of the ownership of narrative. And I wonder, I mean, this is one thing, and these are like, this is kind of tangible outcomes, right? Like you can see the before, you can see the after, and you see that impact almost immediately visually. But how do you, as Riwaq, make use of oral history, you guys have sketching tours, I understand, and like how do you think that helps to sort of capture what is, unspoken or overlooked in terms of the narrative for Palestinian communities? What is that kind of process like?
I mean, yeah, as we know it, the hard truth is that this is a war on narrative, right? So, and there has been a lot that hasn't been written on. There has been a lot that has vanished from our archives. I mean, even our documents, many Palestinian documents, archival documents, even the ones that have been documented have also vanished or been destroyed or looted. We've seen the last of it in the Gaza municipality archival building, for example. But
Hmm.
this has been for years, going on for years. But there have been so many stories and narratives, especially from women, that have not been told, that have not been documented. And oral
Hmm.
history is a way for us to try to involve ourselves in the village. It's
Hmm.
a way for us to understand the village because we do not want to change anything in the village. We want to just brighten it. We want to create this kind of safe space with the community. So part
Hmm.
of it is actually being involved within the community, listening to their stories, knowing more about the crafts that they had, knowing more about the relationship between the different villages, how they used to go to school, how they used to get married. Uh,
Hmm.
we have been learning so much from these stories and from oral history. And we have been using sketching as well as a way to document that and to try to show it in a very, artistic, but also very understandable way, I would say. Um, Oral history sessions we have been involved in them for years, but I would say the main project that we have been definitely working with oral history is the Life Jacket project, which is another project that RIWAQ has, which is basically looking at rural Jerusalem area as one cluster. So
Hmm.
villages such as Qalandia, such as Beit Hanina, Kufr Aqab, Shaba, Al Jib, they're all seen, of course, they all have their own individuality and their relationship with Jerusalem, which they
Hmm.
have been completely disconnected from.
Hmm.
But then they were all connected also in a very like social, economic way. We tried to connect them all together to try to at least defy the very seen geographical fragmentation. Before going into the oral history sessions that we've done in Jerusalem,
Hmm.
this, for example, is the village of Betiksa in Jerusalem, and in the back you can see all the settlements. So it's you see
Hmm.
facing each other.
Hmm.
And this was a rehabilitation project in Betiksa. These are all the villages that we've been working on in Jerusalem. You can see how all of them are like disconnected because of the wall, and it's very hard to reach each other. Yet we try to connect them together and at least their histories together. This, for example, is Kufr Aqab. This is how
Hmm.
it was before rehabilitation, and this is how it is
Wow.
even in a different phase. Now we have another phase. We have rooftops and like green rooftops, and all of the buildings are now served by a library, yeah,
Wow.
association, yeah.
I mean, I was going to ask you to say, to explain when you said disconnected, just again for setting context, because I think it's important for people to understand that they're not disconnected geographically, they're disconnected by man-made, like by force. they're
Yes,
actually contiguous, right? I mean, they are part of a contiguous land, but they've been disconnected, like you said, and then you mentioned that it's because of wall and separations and these
definitely.
kind of
And it's insane, even me, that I am in Kufr Aqab right now. There are so many things that I did not learn before Riwaq. I did not know about
yeah,
even the fragmentation. It's very hard also to understand because each village has its own fragmentation criteria or like system. So, for example, Qalandia, which is here, this
yeah,
is an
that's a very famous checkpoint as well,
yeah,
Qalandia checkpoint. Yeah,
exactly. Everyone thinks like whenever they mention Qalandia, you remember maybe the airport because there was an airport there. Then you remember the checkpoint, then you remember the refugee camp, but there's a whole town, there's a whole village that is completely disconnected. Even the citizens there, they're not a lot, and they are very much disconnected from Jerusalem. They
hmm.
cannot enter there except if they have different IDs. So yeah, you
And
see it
explain just for again for context, what is the actual distance, like in minutes?
without checkpoints.
No, yeah, if it was without checkpoints.
Oh yeah, it would be like, I don't know, 10, 15
10,
minutes
15 minutes, right? Yeah.
traffic.
And with
20
checkpoints,
with
it can,
traffic. With
and with,
checkpoint, if they're able to enter, it can take up to 2 hours. Now they're closing a lot of checkpoints as well, depending on the time. So sometimes it can take 20, sometimes it can take an hour. So
yeah.
you never know as well.
And
But you,
sometimes you're not allowed to go through at all.
yeah, if you have a Palestinian ID, you're not allowed to go through. If I guess only if you have a Jerusalem ID is
Yeah.
when you're able.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this, for example, this is a tour with Nasser in Qalandia we did in 2020, where we walked with her and she made us understand the village. She made us
Yeah.
understand where she used to, play with the girls after school, where she used to go with her mom. She would tell us those stories, and those stories are very untold. So it was a pleasure for us to actually narrate those stories, especially with the older generation and particularly with women, because women and men in Palestinian villages, they really have different stories and different experiences in that
For
sense.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is how, for example, this is how the oral history, tool would benefit us in sketching. We would take a quote, we would write about it, and then we would also draw the woman or man that we're talking with. This, for example, from Al Jib, they would tell
Hmm.
us where you used to go. So they would also let us know about the different buildings, what they used to have. And that's very important for us to document before entering any village.
Right. And then what do you do with this? Like once you've captured this in a note, what then happens with it? Are you collecting it? Are you, in terms of that preservation?
Yeah, we do collect it, but also we had the opportunity to also make it an open access as well. So we on our website, you can go to the Jerusalem Life Jacket Project, and then you can also click on different stories
Oh,
actually
nice.
edited by the people, recorded by them. So that's also very important for us to also share the stories that we
Yeah.
can share, at least. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, picking up on what you were saying in terms of that continuity and say, the connection and disconnection. Um, I'm just curious, this gets to a little bit of the challenge part of all of this, but what are some of the, what are some of the strategies that Iraq has used to respond to these, the destruction of heritage, illegal excavations, the confiscation of historic assets? Like what kind of, and I'm curious on on two sides. First, what kind of legal recourse do you have? And what does that process look like? And then second, practically speaking, are there ways that you can navigate and manipulate some of those restrictions? I'm just curious, like how you guys face that and how you deal with that.
Yeah. Okay, so just to give some context, RIWAQ can only work in Palestinian areas, so only in the West Bank and in Gaza. In Gaza, of course, there's a team working there, not from RIWAQ, but we collaborated with a team there because it was difficult for us to go there. But we only work in the West Bank. So, for example, we cannot work in Jerusalem. We can only work in the rural areas because it's part of the West Bank, let's say. Now it's getting even more difficult, and I will discuss that in a bit. But what I wanted to say is that RIWAQ has been involved in collaboration also with the other CHOs, as well as the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities, the Palestinian Ministry. We have been trying as much as possible to put in a legal framework to protect historic buildings. Until 2018, there was no, like, not a very clear legal framework to protect those buildings. But in 2018, the government decided to have a law that would protect any building that was built before 1917, which is good. But at the same time, of course, we cannot forget the buildings that were built in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, of course. And unfortunately, these are not protected by law, not yet, anyways. So yeah, so this is part of it. So we also work with the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities to try as much as possible to make this legalized. And of course, also our responsibility is to try to raise awareness, or maybe to advocate for cultural heritage preservation. We have to work together with the community to maybe reach a point where they can see also how important cultural heritage is for them, and how
Hmm.
they can imagine also what those buildings can represent after being rehabilitated. So I think that's also very important. But unfortunately, I mean, we cannot also deny what is happening on the ground, which is that the Israeli occupation is trying to control every single thing in the Palestinian land, even the land that they accepted that Palestinians can have. So there's land division, of course, there's heritage destruction. Even a few days ago, they also designated 63 Palestinian archaeological sites in the West Bank as being Israeli heritage sites.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah. So we have been trying as much as possible, particularly in the last 2 years, to try as much as possible to control heritage sites, just like the one in Sabastia, just like you can see in Hebron, in Al-Haram al-Ibrahimi, which is one of the most important Islamic mosques in Palestine and in the world. They have been trying to control it. They have been trying to let settlers just attack and come in Al-Aqsa as well, in many different churches as well. So you can see that it's happening despite having a very obvious also international legal framework that they have to accept, and they have to work by. But yeah, so this is something that is also sometimes beyond our control. But we try
Yeah.
as much as possible with the community, at least, and at least with the Palestinian government, to work on at least having laws that would protect and preserve those buildings.
I mean, I think, it's not shocking, right? I mean, it's frustrating, it's ridiculous, it's criminal, whatever, but it's not shocking. I mean, we are looking, we're talking about a regime that clearly doesn't care about law. So, like, I mean, they don't care about law when it comes to slaughtering people. They're not going to care about law when it comes to decimating heritage. Um, but I just, I mean, this is so frustrating, but I'm just very, like, on what basis would they claim a clearly, obviously Palestinian heritage site as Israeli? I mean, where, how does that even, where's the log? I mean, that's probably an illogical question to ask, where's the logic? But what is the logic that gets used?
I think the logic is there, by the way. I don't think it's only like just sporadic,
Haphazard kind of,
no,
okay.
I
So
don't
what
think
is
so.
it?
I think more or less it comes back to narratives. I think it comes back to, like, oh, us owning it, because in the end it's about who owns what, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's what I think, but I also agree with you in the sense that there's no stop to them. So of course, why stop now? So of course, if there's the ability to continue, why not continue? So it's both ways. I think they can manage to also, but of course, I have to say that these things also go through a reading and a first reading and a second reading. And of course, maybe on the ground this doesn't happen, but in the end, unfortunately, what's happening right now is, yeah, it's definitely intensified, especially when it comes to settlers, because with settlers, it's not legal, it's nothing. So it's just,
It's,
yeah.
it's chaos. I mean, there's absolute anarchy, and it's, I think, intentional anarchy, right? Like, it's the lack of intervention versus actually them doing something as a government or as a regime. It's
And
sort of
allowing them. Yeah.
exactly. So it's that kind of stepping back and being like, I don't know, this is what's happening. These guys are crazy. Um, well, I mean, I guess that's, I did have a bit of a question around how you guys approach the safeguarding of the cultural heritage in this context. But I think what we were just saying now led me to kind of another question, but to ask, practically speaking, how many of your projects have been thwarted or, challenged or destroyed? Anything like that? Have you had any of that kind of
Yes,
obstacle?
yes, we did. We have a case in the West Bank that I can talk about, and
Hmm.
there's also the case of Gaza, which I can also talk about.
Please, yeah.
In uh, in uh, in the West Bank is about the village of Ramin. Ramin is part of Tul Karam area, so it's in northern part of the West Bank. You see this beautiful building on top of a hill that was supposed to be restored for a rural cinema from the community. They wanted to do like a cinema where also people can see the stars and use also the public spaces there. And the contractor and workers started working there, but then a settler came in with his gun and started threatening them to be out of the site. So of course, out of the safety, of course, of the for the contractor, of course, with the village council, we decided to opt out and leave the project, unfortunately. But yeah, this has been happening. This happened around in November of 2023, I would say. November or
Mm,
December of 2023.
mm,
But when it comes to Gaza, um, I'd like to share maybe some of the projects that we have worked on before
mm-hmm,
the genocide, before 2023, and then maybe also show you what's the state of those buildings is.
mm-hmm,
This, for example, is Beit al-Saqqa, which is part of, it's in the old city of Gaza. Of course,
mm-hmm,
most historic sites are located in Gaza, but of course, there are also others in Deir al-Balah, in Khan Yunis, in Rafah a bit, but mostly they're all in the old city of Gaza. This
mm-hmm.
was the building. We restored it in 2014. This was in 2014, and that was the latest photo we've had of the building. And unfortunately, we do not have any access to it right now, so we do not know how it looks like right now. Probably it's more damaged for sure.
So all that work I mean, just destroyed all of that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, even when you look at them, of course, you become like helpless. But when you see the number of people also, and then what has been
Of
happening
course.
for the people, you feel like yeah. You feel it's yeah, it's insane what is happening also to cultural heritage, and it's
Of
it's
course.
not more than just the stones. Yeah, just like for example Basha Palace, we did not have any intervention in it, but we captured it, we documented it in different ways. We also have a book about Gaza's cultural heritage from 2007, and our agenda of 2020 was about Gaza's fishing seasons and different things. And this is the building now.
Oof.
The building was also
This is the palace?
this is the Basha Palace, yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And mind you, these photos are only from 2023, end of 2023, beginning of 2024. So now we do not know how they look like as well. Some
Mm,
institutions are trying to at least, because we're also part of a consortium of institutions where we all came together to try to assess, to document, to try to maybe get the stones in a safe space. But of course, now everything has stopped completely.
mm,
This is the Great Omari Mosque, which I'm sure many have heard of it.
mm-hmm,
And in 2024, people were going under the rubble and praying there and having the Ramadan iftar there. So it's such a very important, not only religious site, but it's a very important social site for the
mm-hmm.
Gaza. And this is how it looked like from the last time we, yeah,
God. Omari, is that your family?
Omar is my family.
Yeah.
We're a very big family.
Yeah, we all are. We're all big families.
And
Wow.
uh, Yeah, as mentioned earlier, it's very hard to feel helpless, but also as institutions, we have a responsibility to try as much as possible to vocalize and to amplify the voices of the people in Gaza and write about at least what we know, which is cultural heritage. I mean,
Mhm,
we're not political spokespeople, we do not know anything about anything else, but we know about cultural heritage and what it means to its people and how important it is to support especially the experts of cultural heritage who are now in Gaza and now are suffering, yet they are still working on trying to assess, trying to document. They still want people to know what's happening to their historic sites and yeah, cultural heritage. So this is just it's just a plan of how we looked at it, that we would like to have assessment, documentation, capacity building. We would like to have emergency interventions, which we did, especially in the beginning, and
mhm,
then hopefully be able one day to rebuild Gaza by the experts and by the people there.
mhm,
So yeah, we have a lot of archival material documentation on all historic sites in Gaza. The last report from UNESCO was that around 110 historic sites were either completely or partially destroyed out of 264, so almost half of it. And yet the other half is still unknown what their condition is. So of course that's also an issue. We have had the pleasure of working also with local and international partners who have been working on risk assessment, on damage assessment as well, who have been helping us and the people, the experts there to try to have a guideline, to try to do some mapping, to do some emergency intervention. So it's a very collective effort that is done by institutions and individuals as well.
mhm. And you were saying that despite the destruction and despite the genocide and despite this, this moment, there are people that partners that you guys work with in Gaza who are still working on kind of documenting and I think again like that is it's such a kind of poignant reminder of the power of that kind of self-preservation instinct that that is a fight for survival, right? So like you're not just I mean it's incredible that people would have the wherewithal in the midst of all of this to also think we need to capture this so that it doesn't get lost in the larger kind of scheme of this destruction, right? So that it's about a narrative ownership as well.
Yeah.
um
And
that's just
to be honest, it's also about, as you said, it's also about who will lead this kind of building process afterwards, reconstruction process. It's the people of Gaza. They know best about their
of
historic
course,
site. No one should claim to know, even if you have experiences of 10, 15, 20 years. It
of
does not matter
course.
at the end. And but at the same time, unfortunately, especially in the past 2 months, things have been drastic, يعني insane. Starvation. I'm sure everyone knows also what's going on, but yeah, it has been very much intensified to the extent that there is literally little that can be done, at least on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're saying, I'm sure people know, but I don't know that, I don't know. I don't know if people's algorithms really kind of
Yeah.
let them see what we see. You know what I mean? I mean, it's yeah, I think it's important to say it again. I mean, I think it's important that you're saying, it sounds so it's crazy. It sounds crazy to me when you say the last 2 months have been particularly insane. How
Mm.
could it possibly be more insane?
Yeah.
How is that possible?
Yeah. Yeah. No,
You
it's
know?
yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So, before I ask you there's about three questions or three comments in the chat, but before I go to that, just two more kind of, forward-looking questions maybe. One is a backward-looking question, but to ask you, like, what do you think has been a milestone or one of the most significant milestones or moments for RIWAQ in its history that you kind of feel maybe defined the organization, and is it this moment or is there another moment in since 91 that you feel has kind of helped shape the image of Riwaq?
Um, I think. I think it's different milestones. I think it's very hard to pinpoint one because each of them was responsive to what's going on, to
Mm,
the Palestinian cause, to the Palestinian people as well. So, for example, the 50 Village Project is a response to defying the geographical fragmentation that is happening in Palestinian geography and history. The Life Jacket, which is the Jerusalem Rural Areas project, is also a way of trying to connect the disconnected.
right,
Definitely the Gaza project, it's not even a project, it's also it's something that is beyond us and it's a responsibility. It's
right.
not it's the least we can do. So for us, of course, this is the major importance for us. It's the most significant thing that we need to work on. But I think each and every project that we had, for example, the registry is also very important for us. It was the backbone of our work. It is also the documentation that we needed in order for us to continue. So I think each milestone represents something important. And it's also very important for us to get recognition also from international and local entities. For example, when in 2011 we won the Aga Khan Architecture Award
Hmm.
for Bir Zayt Rehabilitation Project, for us, this also encourages us to
Right.
continue. Of course, seeing the impact it does on the people is the most important thing as well. And even after years, when you come back and see how these buildings are still restored and revived, is very important. And I think that's the most important thing. It's also talking to people, community engagement. That for us is what's very important.
Of
Yeah.
course. And allowing, allowing that kind of giving that sort of platform for people to be able to tell their own stories and to reclaim kind of their own history, right? And have some hand in hopefully helping them to preserve it and take some pride in it. Um, oh, wow. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a couple of the questions that are in the Q&A. We have about 6 minutes to go.
Yeah.
So, one question, well, it's a comment and a question, but Shanouda from Al Fanar was saying your work is absolutely incredible, which I completely agree with. And keeping the narrative is extremely important to preserve Palestinian identity. He's saying, do you have any work in Jerusalem or in lands outside of the occupied Palestinian territories? And I know you were saying, so you have the Jerusalem Life Jacket um, project, but you aren't licensed to work in Jerusalem. Is that true? So how
Yeah.
does that work?
Because rural Jerusalem, so the villages of rural Jerusalem are closer to the West Bank.
So are they incorporated? No, are they incorporated under that, or do you
Some
have?
of
Is
them,
it
yes. Some of them, yes.
okay?
So that's the only place where it can work. The only way we
Okay.
could work in Jerusalem is not through physical intervention. The only way is, for example, through surveying, which we did in the village of Lifta,
Uh-huh.
yeah, which was occupied during the Nakba. This
Yep.
people were displaced from there. So, of course, for example, this is what we do. We take some photographs, we do some documentation, we have some publications about cultural heritage of Jerusalem, but we cannot work in Jerusalem.
Hmm. Okay. So that
Allowed.
explains it. Because at one point I was like, I thought okay, but then you
Yeah.
have a Jerusalem project, but it's not. Okay. So the other question comment is anonymous, but it says such a powerful and important work that you're doing in RIWAQ at RIWAQ Hiba. For those listening today, what can we do? Which actually goes to what my question was going to be anyway, but what can we do to help raise awareness of this incredible work that RIWAQ does? And what messages can we share with our networks to highlight the violations against Palestinian cultural heritage? And I think this is a really key question because now a lot of what people want to know is like, how can we raise awareness about what's happening in Palestine politically and all of that, which is, of course, very important. It can also be quite dangerous to do that, right? But in this case, I appreciate that someone is taking the time to think like, what can we do to raise awareness about the violations against the heritage as well? So yeah, what do you have to say to that?
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much. And thank you all for attending. I hope I wasn't long.
Not at all. No, this is perfect. And we right on time, and it was
Great.
so informative and just perfect. Really, thank you.
Once later. Yeah, thank you. I think there are many heritage organizations and also legal organizations that are now working on the ground in the West Bank and Gaza as well, but mostly in the West Bank to try as much as possible to document the violations and what's happening with the settler attacks and whatnot, and other violations from the Israeli occupation. So I think maybe recognizing those institutions. We can also maybe afterwards I can send in some information if you want, some articles,
Please.
some reports. Ecomos Palestine they have done some reports also reporting on Sabastia, reporting on Hebron, on what's happening. I think what we understood is that amplifying the Palestinian voices is very important, and I think it's very important to highlight those voices and to try to listen to them and to what is needed, because maybe they are the ones who are now understanding what's happening on the ground, and that they can at least come back and maybe have a conversation, maybe think together, because this is in the end a very collective cause, and we understand that. But at the same time, it's also very important to listen to the people on the ground, to what's happening. RIWAQ has also, we do have some links to some of the reports, some of the public statements about heritage violations. So I think that's also important, but also legal networks and organizations have been working on trying to come up with some reporting on the ground that is happening, or even international NGOs here. Some of them have been also reporting honestly about what's happening on the
Right.
ground. I think that's very important. And Riwaq is always happy, of course, to talk about its work and share and learn together. And yeah, we would be happy for you to join our network, to join our membership program. That would be amazing for us to also maybe, yeah, get to know each other more and have more communication about it.
So how can people do that? Do we have the website? Maybe we can put it, Nihal can put it for us in terms of joining the membership. That would be amazing.
I think this,
There
can
you
you,
go.
yes.
Yep. Hmm.
So you can, these are the
Okay.
social media handles. There are also the donation links, and on the right is just a link tree, with all the
Yep.
links if needed. You can,
Amazing.
yeah.
Okay, so here's another question from Fadi. So he says, Hiba, thanks for sharing your experience and for the great work. As someone who recently visited Palestine, I was so frustrated with the checkpoints. Yeah, believe me. I know, we know. The question is, there seems to be pressure on communities to leave their homelands and to head to larger cities, although there are hardly any job opportunities for them. So, in your view, what are some of the main reasons for families to leave their towns and villages other than the pressure from military and settlers? Oh, that's an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, we cannot think of only the political aspect being the main reason of people leaving or not leaving as well. As he mentioned, it's also about creating job opportunities, creating safe spaces, having a more social life. And in the West Bank, this social life is unfortunately now being put into just three different cities and not even the rural. And that's where we go back also to the importance of having
Yeah,
rural areas as revived as the cities. Of course, not
right.
not the same, because each has their own, characteristic and identity. But at the same time, being able to look at rural areas as being, revived and vibrant.
Yeah.
Um, I think everyone is having different senses. For example, in the north of the West Bank, many people from the refugee camps and villages were forced to leave. They were
Mhm.
forced to leave their homes with the violations that have been going on. So of course they went to some cities. But
Mhm.
the economic situation, of course, is getting even harder and harder in each and every place in the West Bank. So
Mhm.
I cannot answer on behalf of someone from Hebron or Tulkarem or even Ramallah, but I think, yeah, it's unfortunate that it's becoming smaller and smaller, and it's becoming hard to find where everyone should go, especially
Right.
the hard economic situation.
Of course. Yeah. Um, okay, well the last comment was from Nauman, and I think just asking if we can, so thank you for sharing that, if we can see their YouTube channel, which focuses on Palestine landmarks. So that information is shared, so thank you. And from us, Hiba, I'm gonna just ask you one last thing. If there's anything, any message, any kind of last thoughts that you'd like to share. Um, yeah, just I mean, this was so informative and so amazing, and I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for for doing this with us today, because really, I think this is so important. in the middle of everything that we're looking at, I also think it provides a little bit of hope to kind of see that these kinds of efforts are underway. Um, yeah. So any last kind of thoughts before we say goodbye?
Yeah. Thank you again, Naila, Nihal, everyone at the AFF, and everyone who joined. Um, Two things I wanted to say is that I was talking to RIWAQ's director, Shada, who's here today as well. We were talking about the session today, and we were talking about like what our vision is as RIWAQ, and what we hope to do in the next 10 years at least.
Hmm.
And she said something that really stuck to my mind. She said that what we're doing is putting plasters on stitches,
Hmm.
which is
Hmm.
basically that, yes, we are preserving, we are safeguarding, or at least we hope to do. But yet, the main reason of why there are so many stitches is because of the occupation.
Hmm.
So there should be an end to the occupation, an end to the genocide, in order for us to actually protect and preserve as much as possible from
Hmm.
the cultural heritage of Palestine. Um, uh, we hope to continue with our 50 Village project because for us it's a very important project that really captures many villages and historic centers that wouldn't have been revived if we do not intervene as soon as possible. Because
Hmm.
this is now a timely matter. It's not only about us having the privilege of time. It's not now, it's not there anymore.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and I think what's also very important for us is to look just beyond Palestine as well and to look at the region. And this is why, for example, we're very lucky to have AFF as a network as well, because it allows us also to understand the different experiences of different NGOs or individuals or civil society or organizations who are working on the ground in different localities, yet we are from the same region. So there's a lot to learn. There's a lot
Right.
to revive together. There's a lot of shared history and collective history that unfortunately is now being a bit vanished or maybe unclear. But yes, we do have the same collective pain and struggle and also dreams and hopes that we hopefully are able to collect them together and learn from each other. And going back to circle to Fadi's question, I know
Hmm.
the anonymous question, I think when it's
Uh,
like working in Jerusalem, we would hope yani, that we are able to work in the 1948 lands and Jerusalem to document at least even more what is happening in cultural heritage sites and buildings and hopefully be able to work. But yeah, that's
yeah,
the.
amazing. Well, Hiba, thank you so much. This was so beautiful. I loved seeing your beautiful face. I'm so
Thank
glad that I got a chance to see you again, and I hope,
thank you.
for everyone else, just to also say we are hosting our members and network meeting in December, December 7th to 9th in Amman. It is also the kickoff of our 20th anniversary. So AFF has been around for almost 20 years as of 2026. Um, and I'm Hiba, I hope that you'll be able to join us, you and your colleagues from RIWAQ. I can't wait. Um, it's very interesting. It'll be a very different world since the last time you and I saw each other, but I'll be so happy to see you and hug you. And of course, this is an open invitation to everyone that's joining us today to also look at our, you can RSVP to kind of to attend the meeting because it's open beyond our membership to our network as well. Um, I'm so grateful for this conversation. I'm so grateful for everyone who joined us and stayed through to the end. Thank you so much. And as we say every single time at the end of one of these calls, until it comes true, Free Palestine.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.